UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jen Durrell.
Well, hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
How you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Not feeling too great, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, your house is in the middle of a remodel, and apparently you've got like drywall stuff everywhere, so it might be affecting
it's messing
something, right?
Yeah, it's messing with my sinuses a bit, but
Well, that sucks. Now, my day's been good. Thanks for asking. I'm being facetious.
Well, hey.
Now, as I think I told you before, we've been talking about Midwest Weird Fest for the last 3 weeks. And as you know, most listeners know, it's a festival we run out of Eau Claire, which plays paranormal and horror and sci-fi and weird content. I just found out today we currently rank out of filmmaker reviews, the number 53 festival out of over 9,000 festivals around the planet on the Film Freeway platform. That's how highly we're rated.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed considering we're a little paranormal horror festival out of a college town in central Wisconsin. So, yeah, number 53 out of 9,000 plus is a pretty nice place to be. So
that's pretty cool.
So I'm feeling pretty excited tonight about all of that. I'm also super excited because of our guest tonight. He's an author, hardcore punk musician, and a sales marketing professional. He was originally from the northern parts of Vermont, but he has recently relocated to the beautiful Adirondacks area of upstate New York. He has a lifelong love of folklore, legends, monsters, and UFO stories. He has regularly attended and spoken at writers' groups and various other platforms across the country. He has a passion for writing young readers' chapter books and has released 2 publications to date. Recently, in fact, in late 2020, he signed with Beyond the Fray Publishing, which is one of my favorite publishing companies run by Shannon LeGros and G. Michael Hopf. And in March of 2021, they released his American Cryptids, In Pursuit of the Elusive Creatures. And this publication has become a #1 bestseller on Amazon and has outperformed all other materials in its genre. He's also an explorer for the New York Bigfoot Society. The Cryptopunk has appeared on numerous radio shows and podcasts such as Coast to Coast AM, Midnight FM, and the Leak Project Network. He has recently filmed and will be appearing on an upcoming national TV show for the Travel Channel, and you can also catch him as co-host for the NYBS radio show alongside Gary Robusto. So it is my pleasure to welcome back to the show Kenney W. Irish, the Cryptopunkologist.
Hi,
Kenney.
Hey, folks. How are you?
It's great to have you back on.
I'm happy to be back on. You know, I actually remember the exact date that we recorded the last show. It's just because the specifics of it, but it was July 3rd, so it's been almost a year.
Wow. Just before the 4th. Yeah, this year just seems to have evaporated, I think, around all of us for various reasons. It's just disappeared. But big things happening with you. I was so delighted, as I said in the intro, to see that you'd signed with Beyond the Fray Publishing. The books that come out of that company are just fantastic, and your book's so deserving to be amongst them. So you must have been excited to move to that brand as well.
Yeah, I was, without a doubt. I mean, going from, the previous publisher, who I still have a great relationship with, a fantastic publisher, going from there over, it was strategic moves, business moves, but, I'm happy to be over there. I mean, they put out some like phenomenal material, and they've got some awesome authors that are, signed along with them, so I'm definitely happy to be with them. It's been good, and there's great communication and fantastic marketing, which is key. Because like I always say, you can have something that's fantastic, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's very true. I love the title as well. I love American Cryptids in Pursuit of the Elusive Beast. It's such a it makes you want to take that down off the shelf straight away as soon as you see that one.
Right, exactly. And it kind of fits it better too, because as a lot of folks know, it's a rebranding of a previous publication, but just with so much more lore, legend, monster encounters, and so it's yeah, I mean, it's done really well, and yeah, I mean, I love the title. I've fallen in love with the title, and a lot of people say it's really, it's catchy, and it really goes along with the direction of the material as well. So I've been blessed to be able to have my name on that title, and be with the publisher that I'm with right now. So they're great people.
Yeah, and I love in the title, I mean, well, American Cryptid stands out so much. I love In Pursuit of the Elusive Beasts, because something which always draws my attention is how many of these things there are. Cryptids as well as other various paranormal entities. But let's just stick to cryptids for a moment. And yet we continue to come up kind of empty-handed in our ultimate search for them. So I can't think of anything which is more elusive out there almost. And do you, what as somebody who's had, I know there's lifelong interest in the subject, and you've probably done more research on a wide range of these creatures than almost anybody else, what's your kind of take, or what's your feeling on that elusiveness? The fact that, maybe if there was just Sasquatch, we mightn't have a body, for example, but when there's Sasquatch and Dogman and lake monsters and wampus cats and all of this wide range of fantastic beasties and creatures covered in your book, it always makes me, as I think we chatted a little bit about last time, it always makes me lean to a more paraphysical interpretation of the phenomenon. I don't know what your feeling is when you look at it in that broad kind of picture with so many different creatures.
Sure. I mean, I guess I don't necessarily understand the question.
Oh, okay. What I mean is, if let's just say there was one cryptid in America, okay, for example, let's just say all there was Bigfoot, and we still hadn't come up with a body or that fundamental smoking gun. You know what I mean? That we need to prove it. But because there's so many different cryptids in so many states, and so many towns, the fact that we don't have yet a body or that conclusive proof of any of them, it makes me think, well, maybe these things aren't physical. Maybe there's something else which explains that elusiveness, which your title certainly, hints at.
Okay. All right. Right. So you right. So, yeah, there's a lot of different, theories of why, they're so elusive and hard to find, or should I even say catch? Because, one of the big theories is that they're interdimensional, that they're paranormal, that they're actually considered by some to be, spirits. And when you do go back, into history, when the Native Americans spoke of Sasquatch, I give them the credit for us, knowing as much about them. But they spoke of them as flesh and blood, and they also spoke of them as in spirit, and depending on different which tribe you're speaking of. So it kind of makes me wonder. I mean, I'm a flesh and blood guy when it comes to it, but at the same time, there's still a portion of me that really just kind of like looks into the other direction and says, well, maybe they could be paranormal. There's also the theory of them being extraterrestrial. That because there's a lot of association with seeing lights in the skies, weird activity in the sky, and then a Sasquatch sighting. So there's a lot of theories out there of what it could be, but I mean, to not be caught or not be seen, or when seen for a short amount of time and then disappearing, I mean, it leaves a lot of questions. And it seems like the more that I look into these different types of creatures, that it's just, I end up just coming up with more and more questions. And I've never really been able to get to that point where I'm like, okay, well, this makes sense. And it's like the second, like something starts making sense, something else comes up. and then it just takes me back, like 10 steps. So I mean, it's I guess for me, part of not knowing is kind of what keeps me going at the same time, and kind of what I love about the whole subject, and the whole phenomenon, just because I guess in my lifetime, I don't really want to know, because if I find out and it becomes as common as, say, like the black bear, I don't know, what am I going to do after that? What am I going to write about? I don't know, so, but yeah, I mean, it's, again, there's so many different theories and different reasons why. And there's a lot of credible people that, have said that they've seen one disappear right in front of them. There's again, credible people that have been like, hey, I saw what appeared to be a spaceship in the woods and a Sasquatch not far from it. So, it really makes me kind of go back and forth, on, what is what. So, but again, I refer back to the Native Americans and what they said. And, for me, again, I'm mainly flesh and blood, but I have that side open in me because, many tribes, mentioned, flesh and blood and spirit. So I really think there's something to that.
Yeah, I like that flexibility you have, Kenny. I mean, a lot of people, whether they're in a flesh and blood camp or a paranormal camp or an extraterrestrial camp, they don't have that flexibility to even entertain those other ideas. They seem to get very marred down in their belief system. But as somebody who's primarily flesh and blood, let's say you had an unlimited budget, and this is something I'm always curious about. I have no idea, but what would be, do you think, what would be the best methodology to go out there and actually capture something or prove it beyond any reasonable doubt as existing? Like, just say I was Robert Bigelow or somebody, and I said, Kenny, here's a check for whatever you want. Go out there. What would you have an idea of how you would approach going out to, say, ultimately snagging a Sasquatch or something?
A Sasquatch, I'd say not really. I would say, something like a lake serpentine monster.
Okay, let's do that. That's cool. Let's do that.
I would, definitely, pull together, like the people that study that type of cryptid the most, and come together and, just put everybody's brains together. And I'd, if I had an unlimited resources, I would buy scientists. So, have them, help me put the stuff together. And I'd hit Lake Champlain, because I'm a big Champ guy. I love Champ, the Lake Champlain monster. And that would be what I would go after. I'd go after Champ, and we just would be under the water, and we'd find something. We'd find out whether it's myth or it's fact.
It's funny you mentioned Lake Champlain and lake monsters. Next week we have Ken Gerhard, who's written his most recent Lake Monster book, and we have Katie Elizabeth coming up. And ironically, not only did both of those their books currently about lake monsters, they also one wrote the foreword and one wrote the introduction to American Cryptids, right?
Right. Correct. Yep.
That's just fantastic to have those two names there at the front of the book as well.
I agree, and, I'd be lying if I didn't say that that's probably part of its success, having, both those guys, those individuals that wrote it. But it's funny because, in this world of like, where everything's virtual, I've never ever met either of them face to face. And it's one of those things where, just after a while, you get talking to people, you respect people. And I remember when I was looking at it, and, I'm like, I really respect, Ken Gerhard. I'm like, the guy's brilliant. And I'm going to reach out to him and ask him. And then, at the same time, it's like, I love Champ, and that's Katie's thing. And I'm from Vermont, and she lives in Vermont. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to Katie too, because I'd been talking with her, and they both agreed. And I was like, this is fantastic. Because, I've read books where people have forwards in them and an introduction. The introduction is normally by the author. The forward is by, somebody who's endorsing it. And, I was just like, man, to have, somebody, to have them be part of this project would be phenomenal. And they both, agreed. I said, all right. I said, let me send you the manuscript, so you could read through it, before we 100% agree on anything. Because I've had people send me books before, manuscripts, and they're like, hey, could you write a forward for me? And I read the material. I'm like, you got, I love you, but we got to talk. You really, okay. You got, everything is full of opinion in here. You're hardcore about it, is this, and I said, I can't put my name on that book. I can't write a forward endorsing this book, because if I personally picked it up and read it, I would be kind of like I wouldn't even want to be friends with you, type of thing. So, so again, I mean, if someone's going to write a forward for you, you always send them the material. And yeah, they both went through it, and they both liked it and enjoyed it. And when they both came back and said, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have 2 in my book. So, so it was really good. I was really excited about it. And, they're both phenomenal researchers, phenomenal people. And, I was supposed to be at a few locations last year, a couple conferences at the same time as Ken, but of course everything got canceled last year. And I believe Katie was supposed to be at one of them. Maybe not, but she lives only a few hours from me, so we're once things kind of clear up with COVID, I'm sure I'll be hitting the lake with her and going out and learning from her on what she does with Champ, because again, I'm a lifelong, Champ fan, but I've just never, had the expertise like she does. So it'd be nice to get out there and, be able to see what she does and how she pulls her information up.
From your research or understanding of Champ, though, do you have a take on what Champ is? Like, is there something that you lean towards? It's an interpretation of that cryptid?
I honestly, I mean, a lot of people say, a plesiosaurus, but I personally, I think it's just some type of like, serpentine type of, creature. Because I mean, Lake Champlain used to be part of the Atlantic Ocean years back. And then it ended up separating, became a freshwater lake. So I have to believe that there's still some type of connection, between the lake and, in the ocean, underground, underwater. And I'm thinking that's probably where, it's, something that, it's not necessarily, that's been seen, but not discovered or put in the books, might be lurking and coming up, from time to time. So, again, a lot of people are kind of on the plesiosaurus side, but, a lot of the sightings too, they talk about humps in the water. And from everything I've seen from the plesiosaurus, like the back is just kind of, it's humped, but it's like one. It's just kind of like the long neck, and then just kind of like one long kind of oval like shaped back. But if people are seeing different humps in the water, it'd lead me to believe it'd be a little more kind of snake like. So that's why I'm kind of more on the some type of serpentine creature that hasn't necessarily been identified yet or acknowledged.
I always liked the idea of Nessie or Champ being a plesiosaur, but I think you're right. I remember hearing a paleontologist once also speaking about how plesiosaurs weren't actually able to extend, like the skeletal structure didn't let them extend their neck and head up, which is the classic kind of, sea serpent, lake monster look. It would always be pretty flat in the water. So to breathe, it would just raise up like a crocodile or something rather than go up like that. I do find it interesting that some of these lakes are meant to be on a very similar latitude, right? Like I think isn't Loch Ness and Lake Champlain and a lot of other lakes which have lake monsters in them on a similar latitude, I think. I remember reading that or hearing that somewhere.
I'm not sure. That's something when we when we get off the show, I'm going to actually be looking up now. So yeah, no, I've never actually I've never actually heard that. And it's, what? I've got Ken's new book, and I bet you it's in there.
I've got it too. I haven't had a chance to crack it yet either, but I will. I bet you it's in there too. I should have read it before the show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you always say if you want to be prepared for any questions, read one of Ken's books, and you'll be ready to roll. So
So what are the cryptids in your book? Because there's so many in there. That's one of the wonderful things about it. So we know, obviously, Sasquatches and Champ are both big favorites of yours, or ones that you have a particular interest in. But were there other cryptids when you were researching that book that really jumped out at you as something which deserved more investigation, or were perhaps lesser known, but we should be spending more time looking at?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of with the book too, like, it's definitely, cryptid based, but I put a lot of like lore and legend in it as well. So like, as I was researching different states, like for instance, like, like I see when folks say dog man, like I automatically think of werewolf. So when I was going through and I was researching different states, I came across some states, that, had, still lore of werewolves and sightings from time to time. So I actually, for a state, I actually talked about werewolves in the state and did a little bit of history on werewolves in the state. And I also did vampires, because I came across, where I was reading it, where it seemed like, a lot of the research was kind of bringing me in that direction. So even though they're not considered like a cryptid, it kind of brought me, again, with certain states, like there's some states like you look into and it's like, okay, well, it's a Sasquatch, it's a Bigfoot. And I didn't want every single state to kind of be the same exact type of thing, because, you've got you've got West Virginia, you've got the Mothman. Different states have different cryptids, but some of them are kind of the same. So like I did like the alligator man. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the alligator man.
Tell us a little bit about that. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it's just some of the sightings have been it's like a man with kind of like a human body, but with like an alligator head. It's not like rampant, running rampant and tons and tons of sightings, but it was very, very cool to look into that a little bit further, because I've always heard about it, but I've never really really dived into it, because to me it seemed so funny. But then again, once I kind of dived into it, I was like, this is kind of cool. And then like the Loveland frogman, I ended up having more of that in the book, and talking about the Loveland frogman, and like the melon heads, again, which aren't necessarily a cryptid, but it's kind of scary, kind of monster like. So I put that in the book as well. But when the thing is when I put melon heads in the book, like the Dr. Crow, who is from, the legend is from Ohio, but yet I put it in Connecticut. And the reason I talked about the melonheads in Connecticut and not Ohio, one, because I wanted to make sure Ohio was the Ohio grassman, just because it's huge, it's a Sasquatch out there. So, and the other thing is there are so many sightings in Connecticut of the melonheads. And theory and legend has it, the reason there's so many out there in the woods and on the outskirts of these towns is because when Dr. Crow ended up, having too many children there with the deformed heads after doing his operations and his disgusting whatever he, doing his experiments, he would actually, to try to make sure that, they didn't kind of fall in his area, dropped them off in outskirts, cross town lines. So that's kind of the theory of kind of how they ended up like in Connecticut. But as I was like researching them and, reading more about it, there's a lot of other states that are actually popping up where folks are saying that they've actually been chased by a melon head or they've encountered a melon head. So, it's really hard to say, there's so many cryptids again that don't get talked about as much. Like, obviously, Bigfoot's like it's mainstream. You've got, lake monsters, which you're definitely more mainstream. But at the same time, there's the green clawed beast. I don't know if you've ever heard of the green clawed beast. That it actually, I guess it resembles like the creature from the Black Lagoon, kind of mixed with like the swamp thing from like the 1980s. But apparently the green clawed beast is seen in more like a river, like river areas, not necessarily in like swamps, which kind of threw me off a little bit, because every time I think of any creature that's has to do with any lizard, like you're automatically thinking swamps and marshlands. But apparently the green clawed beast, I guess, lives in from what folks have said with their encounters in rivers and in that certain state. So it's kind of crazy to think. I've heard of it, but there's not a lot of talk about it. But yet that's another cryptid, if you will, that doesn't get a lot of attention. But there's a lot of legend on it, and apparently some encounters that have changed some people's lives.
Huh. Yeah, I like those sometimes more obscure ones. Speaking of creatures which are half man, half half reptile or half alligator, or creatures like the green clawed beast. I used to regularly do in fact the show's back on now on Saturday afternoons, but it used to be a late night show called Area 1051 on a radio station out of the lower part, Milwaukee part of my state. And I used to do the weekly weird wrap up once a week on that. But the host of that show, Dr. Destruction, who's also a horror host, had interviewed people he knew very well who talked about seeing essentially a fish man coming out of the Great Lake down there. And it isn't something which is well known, but he believed, apparently they were longtime, colleagues or friends of his who, now that he did this kind of paranormal type show, felt they were able to talk to him about it. And it sounded in some ways very much like a creature from the Black Lagoon type thing, which came out of the lake and went back in. So I wonder how many of these lesser known, unbranded or unnamed cryptids actually are appearing, all over the place. And people don't have that very obvious, well, it was a Bigfoot, or it was a dog man, or it was a Mothman, just to drop it in. And they just kind of disappear, from public consciousness. They don't quite catch on the way some of these other things caught on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think that's it too, because there's a lot of people that for years have witnessed certain strange beings and never said anything, and then there's some people that witness them and then don't say anything, but then eventually come out and start talking about them. So I think that there's, as time goes on, we're going to continue to hear more stories. I think there's more encounters that have happened with strange, different type of creatures, beasts, or beings, and we're gonna start hearing more. I think we're gonna start hearing more about them. And I think we're gonna start, unfortunately, we're gonna start, hearing, probably a lot more hoax stories, but at the same time, it's really interesting, some of the stuff that I've, material that I've come across and that I've read over the years, that just kind of blows your mind. But and it makes me wonder too why one cryptid would become more popular than the next.
Yeah.
So like, Bigfoot, obviously, I mean, it's there's a lot of marketing with Bigfoot. I mean, you're talking, everybody's heard of Bigfoot, it's, and part of it is because, you've got like, it's used for a lot of marketing. Like there's a pizza out there, I believe, called Sasquatch. You've got the beef jerky. Plus, again, Bigfoot has played roles in different shows, and it's been brought up. But so I think that's why most people know of Bigfoot. Like I remember growing up and hearing of Bigfoot, but I always thought Bigfoot was like, it was just one creature just roaming the earth, and I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of nutty, because it's just like, how can one creature get all over the place? And then, as I got a little bit older and then started, looking into things, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's like a race of different creatures all over the place. And so it's just I just think as we continue to move forward, and people are going to start talking more about encounters as cryptids become again more mainstream. I mean, there's always been TV shows on different things like that, but you've got shows like Ghost Hunters that came out that really pushed paranormal investigation into like the spotlight in mainstream, where it was always kind of there before, but a lot of the time, for folks that weren't, I guess, into the subject, and I was like that for the longest time. The biggest thing that had to do with paranormal investigation was the Ghostbusters movies.
Yeah.
Other than that was it. So that kind of pushed it out, and then you have the show Finding Bigfoot come out, and I love the show to death. But it made it mainstream. The title was catchy, and it got picked up by a lot of people, and a lot of people started watching it. And then just like again with Ghost Hunters, after Ghost Hunters came out 2 years later, everybody's a paranormal investigator. Mm-hmm. And then once Finding Bigfoot came out into their second season, everybody's a Bigfoot researcher now. Yeah. So certain things kind of get that certain spotlight where you go back, like the show, which is I'd say probably my favorite of all, is Monster Quest. Yeah. It's just the show was brilliantly put together, and people that were into the subject loved it, but like folks who weren't really into the subject kind of got into it, but it's like it didn't draw people in like Finding Bigfoot did. Like that show just all of a sudden just the way it was portrayed, and I don't know, it took what folks were doing, and made it mainstream, made it cool, and now it's everybody's talking about Sasquatch, and it's a marketing brand now. Sasquatch is a brand, but the best part about it is there's no trademark on it. You can't really trademark something that we haven't been able to prove actually exists. So until then, I'm going to keep writing books.
And you must have felt that, because you being a paranormal investigator, Jen, you must have felt exactly what Kenny's talking about when all those ghost shows kind of opened up the popularity of that field, right?
Yeah, it sure did.
Although, you know what, like you, Kenny, I really think Monster Quest is a spectacular show. I still watch it. I still watch the repeats of that show.
Yeah.
I think it's the best show in that kind of field since In Search Of. I think In Search Of is the greatest paranormal show ever made. It's still the creepiest. It's still the best shot. It's the most evocative. Well, it was shot on film for starters, so it has a different look. Leonard Nimoy's resonant voice really takes you into this otherworldly kind of place. But post that, I think Monster Quest is the next greatest, broader topic, paranormal, monstery kind of show ever made. So I think Doug Hishak, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. He was the producer of that show, and he just did a phenomenal job on it. And I talked to him from time to time. I'm actually in April. He has a radio show that he invited me to come on. So, so if you don't know Doug, which I'm sure you probably do. No, I know of him, but I don't know. Right? Yeah. Brilliant guy. Very, very scientific, but and I don't say that in a bad way. Where some people, when you say scientific, they're like, oh, well, hold on a second. That doesn't mix with what we're doing. But no, he's phenomenal, brilliant, very, very, very smart, brilliant man. So, and I again, Monster Quest, I just love that show. And and there's shows, that aren't on anymore. Well, they are, but they're like the newer ones. Like, I grew up watching the show Unsolved Mysteries.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and boy, I tell you, man, every time that music would start playing, and then Robert Stack would walk out, and I say this on every podcast, every radio show I'm on, I'm a Robert Stack fan, and and I just I've got a podcast radio show with Gary, the founder of the group that we're on, and we just had Todd Ness on. And it was funny because like I followed Todd for a long time. I really appreciate, his work and everything he's done in the subject of Sasquatch. And I ended up ordering some DVDs of Unsolved Mysteries, like The Legend, and, like just real cool stories. And one of them was a Bigfoot one. And I popped it in. I'm sitting there watching it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Todd. I'm like, so I told Todd, I'm like, look, I am so envious of you. I am so envious of you because you were on Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. And I'm just like, that is just, I'm so envious. And I remember years ago when actually watching that Bigfoot one. And then, once Facebook came out years later and everything, and, we all became virtual friends with everybody. I started following Todd, but I never actually put it together that it was the same Todd, because I think I was 18, I think, when I saw that episode. And I'm over 45 right now. So, and it was just in January when I realized that Todd was in it. So there's a lot of time that went by. So.
Before, when you were chatting about why some cryptids become popular and why others don't, and the whole concept of marketing driving, I suppose, Bigfoot, another cryptid I think that was impacted particularly by the writing of one person was Dogman. It's interesting. I was talking to Ken Gerhard, and he was mentioning how prior to the 90s, he heard very rarely any kind of werewolf or Dogman or Wolfman report. But what I think changed in that period was Linda Godfrey's Beast of Bray Road came out.
Yes.
And it got picked up including Monster Quest. It got picked up all over the place. And then it seems like, other than the Dogman being perhaps just a creature that was seen in Michigan, or like the Bray Road Beast being something in Wisconsin, in other words, in my neck of the woods, all of a sudden there were Dogman reports coast to coast, much like Sasquatch. There was that massive change that seemed to happen because of that book by Linda, or because of the exposure it got. Whether that's the paraphysical type of thing that I often imagine, in other words, people are experiencing something which is affected by their own sensibilities and their own beliefs in the culture, or whether it's people felt more comfortable coming out with their stories about having encounters with these kind of creatures. I don't know, but something definitely shifted, I think, in that time period regarding Dogman.
Yeah, no, it definitely did, and I've got to say, when it really kicked in too, I'd say probably when I noticed, it was probably like 2016, 2017, all of a sudden, it's like, Bigfoot sightings were still like, the big thing, but all of a sudden, I started seeing all these like, Dogman, groups start popping up, and people talking about these encounters with what they saw to be, some type of being in the line of canine, not so much primate, and it just kind of like, I remember it kind of took me by surprise, and then it just kind of, I don't know, like Dogman especially, and I'll say in the last 2 years, has really exploded. And there hasn't been any shows or anything. There's been segments and shows, but I don't know. It just seems like, we're getting a lot of Dogman encounters now, almost as many as we're getting with Sasquatch now, which is very, very intriguing. And it starts making you wonder too, how long, folks have seen these, because a lot of these aren't, the folks that are talking about them, some of these sightings aren't recent. Like, they're like, this was 10 years ago. This was 15 years ago. So it's definitely, to your point, I think people are more comfortable coming out with them now because other people are talking about it. So there's not necessarily that, oh, I'm crazy type of, stigma that, used to be. But yeah, Dogman, I'm hearing a lot of Dogman encounters, just a lot of them. And, I think, some could be, a misidentification, just like, with, certain, Sasquatch sightings, it could definitely very well be a misidentification. But again, there's a lot of people that are like, no, I saw what I saw. And I think, coming forward saying, hey, I saw something called Bigfoot, is again, now it's easier for people to do, where years back it wasn't. And I really think it's along the same line of what you're saying, where people are just more comfortable with saying it.
I think you're dead on. I do think there's something, troubling's the wrong word, but something which cracks the paradigm more with the Dogman, though, because I know some people, because the field's very broad, but I know some people, and I won't name any names because I respect people with all different kind of opinions, but I know some folks who were very in the zoological science aspect of cryptozoology. They're like, we're out there looking for a real creature that, when it comes to something like Dogman, they step back more and they go, well, we don't consider that a cryptid. We consider Bigfoot a cryptid and a lake monster a cryptid, but Dogman something else. And obviously, because it's much harder on some evolutionary level or some zoological level to imagine an upright canine, which, can behave in very many ways like a human. Like you can imagine Bigfoot having, whether it's an undiscovered great ape or whether it's some kind of prehistoric relic or something which evolved simultaneously with us, it tends to fit the pattern of evolution or the pattern of creation or however you want to look at the natural world.
Agreed.
Something like Dogman, it kind of, I was just going to ask you your take on that. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, I definitely see where you're going with that. It doesn't fit in anywhere. It's like, you think of like a lake monster. Okay, well, they've talked about dinosaurs for years. Dinosaurs existed, but where does Dogman even come in? So that's why, for me personally, I kind of put it kind of in the werewolf realm. And I'm just putting it there, like in a sense, as it's loosely there, and meaning, okay, well, this is where I put it because I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing to tie it to anything, other than, I guess, I've heard some people say, and they've said the same thing when it comes to Sasquatch, that, a Dogman is a spirit, it's an evil spirit, and it's a demon. I've heard different things like that as well. Again, with other cryptids, that they've been sent up from hell. I've heard so many different things. But again, I mean, that's a great point, because there's nothing. They don't tie to anything. Where again, there's so many other cryptids where you can say, okay, well, it could be an offspring of some mutation of what we already know exists. But again, I mean, I mean, obviously, there's wolves. There is a line there, but not for something that's 6, 7, 8 feet tall. So it really doesn't have a home. And Dogman, in my opinion, makes less sense than any of the other cryptids.
Right.
And it's like, that's been in the back of my mind, but I've never really pulled it forward and really thought about it until you actually just brought that into light, because it's like, where the hell would they come from? There's nothing. I haven't come across any Native American lore where they've talked about a Dogman. I mean, to a degree, I have, but I haven't. Like, there's not a lot of talk about it. There's talk about, spirits, wolves and spirits, and coming, taking kids at night and stuff like that. But it was never really described like a Sasquatch is described. So it's hard to say, okay, that's what they're talking about, what we're seeing nowadays, because they could have been talking about a large wolf that was roaming the land there, that took kids and ate them. They could be talking about some type of, spirit animal, some spirit wolf entity. But again, there really isn't a tie there. It's very just loose. It's just kind of there.
Yeah.
It's a real mystery, I think. One of the things I like about cryptozoology, and one of the things I like about stories of whether we want to fit them into physical or non-physical creatures, is that it presents a wonderful affront to scientific paradigms which are so confident with the reality of nature and the reality of evolution or the reality of anything else. And I think what particularly stands out for me, and again, I'd love to hear your take on it, is that an awful lot of the cryptids which have traditionally been famous are often presented as prehistoric relics. So, for example, Bigfoot is a wonderful example that it might be a Gigantopithecus or some older version of us, or something which evolved with us or was created with us, however you want to look at it. Of course, lake monsters, when there's a plesiosaur explanation, are similar. There's a lot of sea serpent stories with similar dinosaur-y type explanations. And recently we had Alexandra Brasher on the show, who is the director of a documentary we just screened at Midwest Weird Fest a couple of weeks ago. His documentary is called The Explorer, and it's about something you're probably aware of. I knew of it, and I was very interested in it, but his documentary really highlighted some aspects I didn't know, and that was the Mekele Mbembe out of the Congo Basin in Africa, which is essentially a sauropod dinosaur by all descriptions. But these things, which all tend to be prehistoric creatures pre-existing with us, if we often take the reports at face value, it does a couple of things to the traditional scientific paradigms. It either suggests that evolution worked very differently to the way that we assumed, or that the Ice Age didn't wipe out everything, or that maybe the world, to a creationist science kind of perspective, isn't as old as traditional science would have us believe. So at any rate, however you look at it, the cryptids are an affront. These type of cryptids are often an affront to the scientific paradigm. So that's something which I find particularly interesting about the field.
Yeah. I like the way you put that.
It makes us think about it, or it forces us to reassess those paradigms, I think. Their very existence forces us to reassess reality in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does make sense. Oh, that's deep, my friend, for this time of night.
It's a rabbit hole tonight.
No, I like it because it's something, I'll definitely be, thinking about and, kind of looking into. Yeah. Wow. Well, I like that.
Oh, I'm glad. See, I'm in many ways a 40, and one of the reasons I love all paranormal phenomenon is that it throws a wrench in the workings of science, which is so incredibly confident. It's the reason science doesn't look at this stuff, because it doesn't fit the paradigm. But when enough of these stories build and continue to be heard, whatever they are, whether they're UFO stories or ghost stories or cryptid stories, they're all they put all these little cracks in the paradigm that people are so confident of reality. And so that's what, to be honest, from my perspective, is most interesting. And I think from Charles Fort's perspective and other writers I admire, like John Keel, I think some of the things they liked most was that it made us reassess the reality, which is our day-to-day, working in a cubicle, driving to McDonald's, watching television reality. There's something broader there. It's this mystery and this wonder which we just never acknowledge, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, that's how I've always been growing up, and that's what I love about the subject, because it takes you, like you said, and you said it perfectly, when you're talking about like sitting in the cubicle, you're every day in what we think we know and what we've gotten used to. And it just kind of I don't know what we know, what we say that we know, and what we're supposed to know, and what we're used to, is what bores the crap out of me, I guess. I've got no other way to say it. There's no professional way to say it, nothing. And that's what that's why I believe, I have such a passion. I'm so drawn to this because there's so much that we don't know, but yet, the world is kind of like we're kind of walking around as if we know it all. Like I'm around so many people that, believe that they know it all, and that we have a handle on the world and what's going on, and we're in control. And I'm the type of person where I'm like, I don't think we do. I think we tell ourselves, and I think science is right in many, many, many aspects. But I think there's a lot that's just going on right now that is, I think, to be honest with you, I think science knows that Sasquatch exists. But everything that's been written and everything that's been taught, it would change all of that.
Uh-huh.
And so to admit that it exists, it's really going to take a lot of people, and it's going to shuffle a lot of things around and ruffle a lot of feathers. And I think, to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons why it's the subject is kind of pushed off to the side. I mean, but how long is it going to be before they finally come out and say, hey, yes, they do exist? I mean, what was it, just last year they finally came out and said, yes, there is a such thing as UFOs?
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of time, and I think what's going to have to happen is they're going to come out with another type of, they're going to wait until the next pandemic, and then they're going to say, oh yeah, Sasquatch exists, and just kind of hide it, and it just kind of like they did with UFOs. For us, that was huge for us, but for the general public, like everyone's like, okay, UFO, okay, COVID.
Yeah.
So it was very, very well hidden. So it's kind of like, okay, well, now we've got to be truthful with people. We got to say, yes, there are things like this that exist, but let's wait until everybody's concerned about dying. So I think the next pandemic or whatever it is when they're finally going to say, okay, by the way, we are aware of the existence of Sasquatch, and then again, then World War III, I guess. Right. I don't know. So.
Well, at least we get Sasquatch out of it, I guess.
Yeah, I could roll with that. Yeah. But then at the same time, I'd be kind of sad because I'm like, all right, well, now the mystery's gone.
Yeah. You know what? I really liked how you said that before, how you said in a way you don't want to know, in a way you don't want it just to be as common as a black bear or something. And then where's the excitement? And again, as I'm always honest, I do tend to lean towards a metaphysical kind of interpretation. But one of the things that I love most about the entire phenomenon, other than the fact, like I said before, that it throws a spanner in some of the workings of science, is that it does give us this mythic belief system or this mythic idea that there are things out there that make the world more romantic. And I don't mean romantic in Valentine's Day cards. Sure. I mean romantic in the way that the great poets meant it to be, that reality was somehow more meaningful, again, than just that cubical existence. And I think whatever the reality of a lot of these things are, they serve a wonderful psychological function anyway, and a sociological function and an emotional function, in that they let those of us who hunger perhaps for more than the mundane have those things to still keep us interested and keep us thinking the world's a wonderful place.
Yeah. I agree. And it's kind of like, when you say that, I think back to, one of the things, that was mentioned in my bio at the beginning of the show is that, I like to write, young readers chapter books. Why do I like to write young readers chapter books? Because they're fiction, and my mind is full of, just the good times, in life when I was younger. And, I kind of like to, get away from the reality of everything, and and go back to when the world was a magical place, and there was no strangers were strangers, but you could still stay out until it got dark, and until you heard your mom yelling to you, and you'd never heard of taxes, just the the stuff that just kept you as a young kid. The world was a magical place. There was just so much, possibilities were endless. And then you get a little bit older, then you get your first job, and then you get that first check, and then reality starts to kick in. So I think anything that can keep magic and wonder, regardless of what age you're in, I think is important. And I always say that I don't want to believe in Sasquatch. I want to know, but yet again, at the same time, I don't want to find out if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes me think very much of my daughter. I make sure she is able to live in that kind of imaginal, wonderful world. And she's always talking about she invented a creature called a frippet that was meant to live in our woods. And it was some kind of, I don't know, dragony, dinosaur-y beast that flew. And she's obsessed with all kinds of cryptids. So she's always talking about ropens. She's fascinated with ropens because they're like a pterodactyl. So she thinks there's ropens out in our woods. And she imagines there's dragons behind every bush. And I remember that time when I was little. And it is a magical time. Now, as we're winding down, before we go, I'd love to know what your next plan is, because I bet you've got another book just waiting to be written, or maybe in already being written. So can you give us a hint of anything that's to come?
Yeah, it's think of American Cryptids, but in an international sense.
Oh, great.
So I started working on it in 2020 and kind of put it aside, stopped. Something was telling me to hold off, and now I know why. So I've got a different direction going in it, and but yeah. So again, think American Cryptids, but on the international stage, if you will.
Wow. Well, can we expect that sometime later this year or next year, or do you have an approximate kind of idea when you might have that out?
I'm thinking probably early 2022. I don't think I'm gonna, because I'm kind of going back to the drawing board with it, because I started it in 2020, kind of pushed off to the side, but now I'm kind of because because it's going to be very with how I made changes with American Cryptids, so I'm going to be doing something similar. So
nice.
So I'm pretty excited about it. But I wanted to see how this release went, and how the popularity was of it, and everything, and it's been fantastic. So it's been doing very, very well. So I'm definitely going to continue down this trend, and ride it for all it's worth.
Well, congratulations on your massive success with American Cryptids, and I can't wait to read what I'll just title now as International Cryptids, although I'm not sure if that's the title, but I'm sure looking forward to whatever it is, regardless of the title. I'm looking forward to reading it, and we've got to get you back on when that's released, Kenny, because it was a great joy to have you back on the show again.
Yeah, I was definitely happy to get the invite.
Well, thank you.
You guys are great. You're one of my favorite shows. So.
Oh.
Gosh, well, thanks. We got to get you on more often just to say that.
Yeah.
Well, you're one of our favorite guests too. We were super excited to have you back on. So we were when actually Shannon mentioned that she had a new book of yours, and I was like, yeah, let's get Kenny back on. That's going to be fantastic. So we got super hyped then.
Awesome.
Okay, well, keep it weird, my friend.
I can't help it. It comes natural. I couldn't change it if I wanted to.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it